But we begin with our big story. Let's just start here with the basics. Former President Donald Trump has 4 pending criminal cases. It's a lot to keep track of, but just the sheer number of cases, 4, is worth remembering because 2 of those cases already collided today. Today in federal court in Fort Pierce, Florida, a judge appointed by Donald Trump heard hours of arguments on when the former president's trial over charges he knowingly held on to classified documents after he left office and then tried to withhold them from federal agents will begin. And will it start before or after Election Day in November? Then, at the exact same time in Atlanta, another judge heard closing arguments today in that ongoing legal saga over whether the Fulton County District Attorney, Fani Willis, and the prosecutor she picked to oversee Trump's Georgia election interference case should be disqualified because of a romantic relationship they had. Willis even showing up in court herself midway through that hearing. This isn't the first time we've seen the former president's legal calendar get extremely complicated, but it's also not expected to be the last time. There are 2 other cases, one allegedly on hush money payments to an adult film star, another on January 6th, an election interference that we haven't even gotten into yet. And there are months more to go. So to break down all of this, we want to turn to someone who knows Donald Trump so well. He wrote 3 books on Donald Trump. John, this is the first time I will confess to you, I have read each and every one. You're also obviously ABC News chief Washington correspondent, Jonathan Karl. John, let's start with the historic nature of this, how unprecedented it is to see a former president in court, and how you think that will impact his campaign, his political future, all of that going forward.
Well, it was striking to see that he spent some 6 hours in that courtroom in Fort Pierce, Florida. Some 6 hours. This wasn't the trial. These were hearings on a series of motions related to the timing of the trial, questions such as whether or not the witness list would be made public, how much discovery there would be. These were, technical issues, and Trump sat in that courtroom again for some 6 hours. To put it in context, that is about as much time as he spent at the border yesterday in that highly touted visit to the U.S.-Mexican border. And this is a trend we have been seeing in this campaign. We're just days away from Super Tuesday, and at about as much time as anything else, he is in court. But there were, I think, significant questions in that Fort Pierce hearing, just to take that one, about the timing of this. And that is, we saw that that this trial was supposed to start in May. A series of decisions by the judge have made that impossible. The special counsel now wants to see it start in July. Trump had been pushing, his lawyers had been pushing to have it after the election. But today they were saying that they could start as soon as August 12th. A very interesting move on their part, I thought.
So, John, Fort Pierce, where that trial is being held, is not Palm Beach, where Trump's Mar-a-Lago is. It's about an hour away. We even made a map to demonstrate that. You have to go up I-95 or the Turnpike. I recommend the Turnpike. But the decision to have this trial in Fort Pierce, is that going to have an impact on the trial? And is it a win, a loss, a neutral thing for Donald Trump?
Well, Fort Pierce, I've spent some time there, too. It sure isn't Palm Beach, I'll tell you that much. And there's nothing like Mar-a-Lago there. But I think that this is home turf for the president, not just because it's just an hour drive up north, but he is before a judge, Aileen Cannon, who is a judge that he put on the court, and sure seems in a lot of her rulings that she has made so far to be a Trump-friendly judge, not to say that she's not impartial, but certainly a number of her rulings have favored the Trump legal team. And once a trial is underway, if a trial really does get underway, it'll be a jury drawn, from Florida, from the president's backyard. And I think that may have been why we suddenly saw the Trump legal team float the idea that, yeah, they could be okay with this trial starting before the election, because they see 2 federal criminal cases, both brought by Jack Smith, one before a judge who they see as hostile in Washington, D.C., a jury pool that they see as hostile from Washington, D.C., or a judge they see as friendly, and a jury pool they see as primarily pro-Trump. I think if they have to live with one trial before the election, they would much rather see a trial in his backyard in Florida.
So Trump is in court in Florida. There is that ongoing hearing playing out in Georgia as well. It's another example of just how packed his legal calendar is. You write in your newest book, I told you, I promise you I did read it. I'm a big fan, that this is a campaign about retribution. Does having this packed legal calendar, these swirling legal proceedings, does it help him sell that theme of retribution to voters, in your view?
Well, it absolutely does. He is portraying himself first and foremost as a victim, and he is describing that victimhood as not one that is really aimed at him personally, but is aimed at his supporters. This is what he's telling his supporters. Them, the deep state, all those, you know, government bureaucrats, all the Democrats and the rhinos, they are coming after you, and I'm standing in the way. That's why they're prosecuting me. We're going to get back at them. We're going to get our retribution. We're going to get our revenge if I win in November. So his campaign message and his legal message are virtually indistinguishable, and he's not a traditional candidate who is going out and rolling out a series of policy proposals of things he would do if he would get elected. He's talking about retribution. He's talking about his own victimhood. He's waging a campaign largely from the steps of these courthouses in potentially Georgia, if that goes forward, in Florida, in New York, in Washington, D.C.
John Karl, thank you so much for your time on this Friday night. I cannot tell you how much we appreciate it. Be sure to catch John anchoring. Thank you, sir. Be sure to catch John anchoring this week on Sunday on the ABC Broadcast Network. He's going to have a lot more analysis of Trump's legal woes, plus an exclusive interview with World Central Kitchen founder Jose Andres, just back from the Middle East, trying to get more desperately needed humanitarian aid into Gaza. It's going to be an excellent show. Thank you again to Jonathan Karl. We want to turn now to our big story panel. Joining us today, ABC News contributor and SiriusXM radio host Mike Muse, former Republican Congresswoman from Virginia Barbara Comstock, former Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs at the Department of Homeland Security Marcia Espinosa, and ABC News legal contributor Shauna Lloyd. Welcome into all of you. Shauna, I want to start with you. First, just the nuts and bolts of this. These are complex cases, all four of them. In your experience as a trial attorney, how difficult is it for a defendant to juggle just one of these cases, let alone four?
You know, Jay, it's really hard because what we're talking about is a lot of evidence, a lot of things that you're going to have to produce, discovery, things that have to be answered. But we have to remember that he has legal teams handling most of this litigation. So what you see is it's happening in concert, and what he's using it for is really to reiterate his theme, which is they're coming after me. This is what I'm dealing with. Don't worry about what my issues are. Go ahead and understand what I'm being persecuted about.
Barbara, I want to get into the politics of all of this very quickly. I want to show you this. We've got exit poll data from South Carolina, that primary. 62% of primary voters in South Carolina, according to ABC News exit poll data, say Trump would be fit to serve as president if he were convicted of a crime. But there is that nagging 35%, you see it on your screen, who say he would not be. These are GOP primary voters. So do you view these trials as a benefit to Trump, a liability for him in your view, or is it just a neutral, you know, it washes out?
Oh, I think it'll definitely be a liability, and it's a little bit too cute by half. He's been trying to push them off and push them off, but it's going to be a problem because, first of all, he is going to be spending time and money in court just as the election is really ramping up. Secondly, it's going to be all his own staff and lawyers who are testifying against him, Republicans, MAGA people, again, just at that time when everyone is focused on the election, and it's going to be swing voters who decide his fate. And swing voters do not like convicted felons as their president.
Marcia, with that in mind, this idea of swing voters, how this impacts independents, we haven't seen the Biden administration make much mention of Trump's criminal charges, except for calling him a threat to democracy because of his attempts to overturn the 2020 election. But do you see that changing? Democrats making more mention of these legal woes the closer we get to Election Day?
Yeah, I think most Americans are just confused about this whole process. There's so many court cases. Trump has over 90 felony charges against him, and it's possible he could be the first convicted felon in U.S. history to represent a major party. So it's concerning, and I think that Democrats will start calling it out, especially as we see these court cases be postponed. It's important to Americans to have all the facts before they go to the polls. So some of these should be moved up. I think today's the only day I've ever agreed with Nikki Haley when she said, let's get this out of the way before we go to the polls.
Mike, I always save the hardest question for you, my friend, which is to that point of Americans trying to make sense of all this. 4 trials, 3 states, plus the District of Columbia. There's a lot of news coverage. These are serious charges. But how much is this consistent talk and coverage about Trump on trial? Do you think all of that somewhat dilutes voters to this and they start to tune it out?
I think that's a really great question. I actually, Jay, think the opposite. And here's why. Before, if you would have said this back in October or November, everything seemed so far away. And so there was just this constant talk of court cases, trials, indictments. But now we're into March, we're heading into April, we're still waiting the Supreme Court. I think now Americans are about to lean in more, in particular as Super Tuesday is coming around, the Republican nomination will more than likely be locked up. It will be a 2-person race between Biden and between Trump. We're getting near the Republican National Conventions. These cases are getting close to court. I think now we're going to start paying a lot more attention, and everything seems to be more in a linear, logical order. So I think Americans are actually going to start tuning in more. But that was a really great question.
Yeah, Mike, Barbara, Marcia, Shauna, thank you very much. Go nowhere.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.